Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session, Unified Network Visibility for Faster SD-WAN Onboarding. I'm Monique Lucy, Director of Product Marketing here at LiveAction, and I will be your host. I'm also pleased to say that I'm joined by David Azumo, Principal Technical Marketing Engineer here at LiveAction. He will be diving into the technical demonstration, and during that time, feel free to ask questions during the session using the Q&A panel on the right. We will be recording this, and you'll receive an email with a link to the playback after the event. And we've also shared some additional resources that you might find useful, and you can find these by clicking the Attachments tab. So with that, I will turn it over to David for the demonstration.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our LiveAction webinar. In our discussion today, we'll briefly discuss how LiveAction LiveNX can help network administrators and engineers with day zero planning and baselining for their SD-WAN deployment and migration. We'll also look into how they can leverage LiveNX to easily onboard a Cisco SD-WAN site, utilizing our northbound API connections with vManage. Day zero in an SD-WAN rollout is extremely important. Network engineers and administrators need a platform to baseline their existing network to better understand overall WAN bandwidth utilization, capacity planning, identifying their top sites, their top applications, as well as measuring business critical application performance. Here is an example of LiveAction LiveNX's geotopology with sites laid out across the map. Applications are overlaid over the top. By clicking on the applications in the legend here in the lower left-hand corner, we can see exactly the path that these applications are taking across the network. So, for example, here's Voice over IP. These are the video traffics, Citrix, or perhaps Outlook Web Services. So interestingly, we see that for certain applications, it's full meshed or hub and spoke through our data center in New York. Or in the case of Outlook Web Services, some of that traffic is just going directly out to the internet. There are many built-in dashboards that users can take advantage of, or they can create their own layouts. So let's dig in further and let's look at some of the dashboards within LiveNX. So to get to these dashboards, simply click on the menu button and we'll select Dashboard. So in this case, we'll focus our attention first off on our WAN bandwidth dashboard. And of course, this is so important to get visibility across the global WAN. Now, when you think of the WAN, you most likely think of three important dimensions of interest. You think about sites, and here it is laid out on the left-hand column. You think about applications traversing the network, and there it is in the middle. And then likewise, you think about service providers and how the service providers are transporting critical data. Now, this dashboard helps you to identify the most utilized sites to target, for example, a POC for SD-WAN. So here's your critical sites like Birmingham, Madison, San Jose, Seattle, Los Angeles, New York. Likewise, you may want to get further visibility into the most important applications throughout the entire network. And here we can see that there's a good amount of traffic that's best effort or voice, video, along with critical applications. The most important service provider, well, it's obvious there. It's your MPLS provider. Well, as you're exploring your global wide area network, perhaps you may want to filter to zoom in on specific sites and so forth. You can easily do that by taking advantage of LiveAction's search and filtering capabilities. So for example, here at the top, you can search for a particular site, perhaps a region like North America, the United States, Europe, or Asia. Perhaps you may also want to look at specific applications and have the entire dashboard converge around applications like Voice over IP or Office 365. You can easily do that by taking advantage of LiveAction's filtering capabilities. Now, as you continue to plan and baseline the network, you may want to look into details on a specific site. So let's see how we can do this. Well, first off, we'll go back to that menu button. In this case, we'll select Main, and we'll focus on the overview page. So let's click on that. So when we were first working with some very large enterprise customers, we created this overview page to provide high-level status of your sites, devices, interfaces, and all of your alerts. We can use the same filters that we reviewed earlier to drill down specifically on particular sites, regions, and so forth. So let's go ahead and drill down on a critical site that we identified, and that's Site Los Angeles. So I'll select Site and start typing in Los Angeles. It'll autocomplete. We'll select it, apply the filter. Now this entire page will quickly converge around that area of interest, in this case Site Los Angeles. So again, we see the site, the devices, the interfaces, and all the alerts that are contextually relevant to Site Los Angeles. So let's drill down specifically on this critical site. So I'll do that by clicking on Los Angeles. And we'll bring you to the site page. Here we have a whole host of reports to help you better understand what's happening at this critical site. So there's service provider, bandwidth, inbound, on the MPLS network, as well as outbound. Your top applications, such as critical applications like Voice, Google Docs, Citrix, along with identifying other applications that's on the network too that might not be important, like YouTube and ESPN Video. Further scrolling down, we'll see those applications outbound, the QoS markings inbound and outbound, along with your top conversations. Each of these reports are very important as you're baselining and planning for that SD-WAN rollout. Each individual site, as you start migrating to SD-WAN, getting this visibility is very important. So likewise, you can drill into further details about the site, like the availability, the devices, the interfaces, as well as the WAN applications. So let's take a look at the WAN applications. We'll click on that tab there. And we'll show you all of the applications going in and out of the site, along with the overall average input and output bandwidth and the application performance metrics at a glance. Now, perhaps we want to focus our attention on a critical application like Voice over IP. So I'll type that into the search, and here we bring up the voice application. I'll click on that application to get further details. So notice here for Los Angeles and your critical application Voice over IP, we get a whole host of detailed information, including application performance for jitter as well as packet loss, along with bandwidth consumption, bytes and bit rate for this critical application. Now on the right-hand side, as we saw earlier in the site page, we show you the view, the topology of this site. So in Los Angeles, we have a WAN router, and it's very dynamic in nature, along with our LiveWire, a live action packet capture and analysis platform that's deployed within our site. The WAN router is connected to the service provider MPLS, and for this critical voice over IP application, we see that it's primarily traffic going to and from our data center in New York. Now, perhaps we want to also drill down further to get more details about this voice over IP application and some of the conversations that's taking place. So by clicking on that application flow on the right-hand side, we can bring up details about the voice over IP conversation, including packet loss details, bandwidth, and so forth. And by clicking on this path view button, we'll automatically bring up a hop-by-hop path analysis for this critical voice over IP application. So we see that the traffic originated in New York, it went across the MPLS network, and then into Los Angeles. And this further helps us to troubleshoot, get performance bandwidth or performance information about these applications. So we see right when the traffic starts hitting Los Angeles, that's where we're getting over 10% packet loss. Well, let's look further at a specific dashboard that we created for some of our large enterprise customers, and that's an application dashboard. Again, we can get to that by clicking on the menu button, going to Main, and then clicking on Dashboard. Now in this case, we'll look specifically at this application dashboard that was custom built for a specific customer. Here, we're able to see a whole host of reports and widgets about your top applications, the top web servers that are in use within the network, along with performance metrics like application network delay, voice video jitter and loss, along with site capacity planning per service provider and per site. Now, each one of these widgets can easily be drilled down upon to bring up a corresponding report. And in turn, every one of these reports could be scheduled, it could be run ad hoc on demand, or it could be also shared with other engineers within your organization. So let's take an example. We'll click on the application network delay widget, drill down to a report. So here we see the details about the application network delay, along with critical applications down below, like Office 365. There's network delay information, application delay data, along with retransmission counts. Now, perhaps you may want to drill in further on Office 365 to identify the top users of this critical application. All of this is right at your fingertips. Simply right-click on Office 365, and you can bring up a whole host of reports for continuous drill down. Let's specifically look at the top conversation, so I'll select that. Now, here's the same context. We're looking specifically at Office 365, but now we're looking at all the conversations. So very easily, we're able to continuously drill down to further explore the network to understand exactly what's happening. All of LiveNX's monitoring capability, the dashboards, the historical reporting, all of this is very useful to diligently baseline and plan for your SD-WAN deployment. After using LiveNX to baseline the network and gather critical application performance metrics, we're ready to roll out our SD-WAN deployment. We already have a few sites deployed with Cisco SD-WAN, and we see this on our geotopology here. For example, there's data center number 1 in San Jose, along with data center number 2 in RTP, and a branch office in Miami. So let's fast forward a bit and onboard a new SD-WAN site, Chicago, into LiveNX, utilizing the northbound API connection to vManage. To do this, we'll go up to the upper right-hand corner and select the gear icon, and then choose Settings. Then we'll select Integrations, and then Cisco SD-WAN. This is where the network administrator can enter the vManage credentials to set up the connection between LiveNX and vManage. As a note, users in both the operator or netadmin user groups on vManage can be used for LiveNX integration with the Cisco SD-WAN controller. So let's go ahead and click Discover. This Discover Devices UI can be used to onboard our new site, Chicago. This workflow with Cisco SD-WAN integration, as a note, is also available in our General Device Management capability under the Configure menu option. So now we'll specify the SD-WAN device IP ranges to discover. In this case, we're looking specifically at one device in Chicago, so I'll enter the management IP of it now. These management IPs for the edge routers must be accessible to LiveNX. This is to ensure connectivity for pulling the device via SNMP and also IP fix collection. Next, we'll set the Cisco SD-WAN site ID mapping to internal LiveNX site names. We can do this by clicking on Set Mapping. Now, this can be useful in a migration where LiveNX is already managing existing sites pre-SD-WAN deployment. It's also especially helpful to create a user recognizable name for a site, for example, Chicago. So next, we'll click on the Add button. The Cisco SD-WAN site ID for Chicago is 400, and we'll name this site Branch 2 Chicago. and then click Add. Now, if we have many sites that we want to add within LiveNX via the vManage integration, you can leverage the Import CSV File option. But in this case, we'll go ahead and just select Apply. The user can then verify their SNMP settings. We have default SNMP connection settings already set. And then likewise, the node, the LiveNX node, to discover this device or a set of devices. In this case, it's the local server node. Just some background information. The nodes allows LiveNX to scale horizontally for very large deployments. Some of our existing enterprise customers are global in nature with hundreds or even thousands of sites. And many of them have nodes strategically deployed in various geographic regions. These nodes will locally gather SNMP data and also, very importantly, IPFix to reduce the need to backhaul large amounts of flow data to a single data center. So in this case, again, we'll just select the local server node and click Discover. So via the vManage integration, we automatically learned of our Chicago Edge router, BR2 vEdge 1. We can select it and then choose Select Interfaces. So from the API integration, we also learned about all the interfaces within the device, the IP addresses of them, along with semantic information about each of these interfaces. So for example, Gigabit Ethernet 00 is a WAN interface, and it's connected to the MPLS service provider. And likewise, Gigabit Ethernet 01, it's also a WAN connection, and it's linked to the business internet service provider. So simply, we'll just select this button, Add Selected. And just like that, our new device is added for Site Chicago. And there it is. By leveraging the LiveNX API connection to vManage, we were able to learn about the site, as well as the device or devices, the semantics, and all of these information from the controller. So for example, we can verify that the site Chicago was added. We can choose the menu button, go to Topology, and select Geotopology. And here we see our brand new site Chicago was added. By learning about the semantics from the controller, we're able to identify WAN links, the capacity of those links, the colors or service providers associated to the WAN connections, along with even the site IP ranges per site. All this metadata helps us better make sense of the network holistically, the conversations, the applications, and performance site to site throughout the system. With this geotopology view on our operations dashboard, we can see the sites laid out nicely and observe how traffic shows up, and we can pin the site-to-site tunnels on the map as well. Notice we can isolate specific types of traffic like VoIP by selecting it in the legend down below, or SAP, or Outlook, or various other applications. Quickly and easily identifying that on a geotopology map, made simple by the integration with Cisco SD-WAN. Well, I hope this discussion helped you better understand how LiveNX can help in day zero planning and baselining of the network to prepare for an SD-WAN deployment, and also the simplicity of onboarding Cisco SD-WAN devices and sites into LiveNX. In the next webinar in the series, we'll review how to troubleshoot an SD-WAN brownout scenario for day one verification of the SD-WAN policy.
Thanks so much, David. That was great. Why don't we pause here and open it up for some questions? And I actually see one here. David, this is for you. How is this different from vAnalytics?
Sure. Thank you for the question.
LiveNX is very complementary to vAnalytics, and vAnalytics, of course, as you would expect, is very focused on Cisco SD-WAN, and it does a very nice job providing insights for SD-WAN. LiveNX is a full NPMD platform, so network performance monitoring and diagnostics. So as we kind of learned in the webinar today, uh, it can be used for day zero scenarios, so pre-SD-WAN deployment, where you really want to baseline the network, plan for the network. SD-WAN isn't deployed yet, so LiveNX is able to do all of this with its full granular reporting, both long-term and also real-time, to plan for that deployment scenario. LiveNX is also very helpful in a very hybrid scenario. So it's multi-vendor. We can support Cisco, we can support Palo Alto, F5 load balancers, Gigamon, and various other types of network um, vendors. So it's multi-vendor in nature. Again, that's different from vAnalytics. It's multi-telemetry, so we can pull in a whole host of different types of telemetry to provide that visibility, like flow, SNMP packets, and so forth. And then it's also multi-domain, so we can not only look specifically at the WAN and provide insights there, but also the LAN and the data center, so supporting things like firewalls and switches and routers and so forth. And then maybe one other thing that I'd like to just touch on, because there's many different aspects that we can kind of go into detail with LiveNX. But LiveNX is an on-prem deployment, typically for a lot of our customers. So we work with three-letter government agencies or very large enterprise customers, and many of them want to have LiveNX deployed on premises. So we can do that and provide that same visibility on premises. Or if a user or an enterprise wants to deploy LiveNX into their public cloud instance, we can do that as well. So there's a lot of flexibility. But that's just some high-level points on some of the differences and the way that LiveNX is able to help complement something like vAnalytics.
Thanks, David. See, a few more questions have come through. One is, how does LiveNX gather application network performance metrics for voice and critical apps?
Yes, thank you for that. So LiveNX can gather a lot of data specifically from IPFix. So when you think about things like NetFlow and IPFix, you typically think about getting application data or conversation information, source and destination IP addresses. But interestingly, from various network vendors, we're actually able to get application performance data directly from Flow as well. So as the example that I showed in the webinar, with voice troubleshooting or critical application network delay or application delay, we were able to get a lot of that data directly from the routers itself. So for example, in iOS XC router, sending us that application performance metrics via IPFix. And another key way that we can get that data is with our LiveWire capability. So our LiveWire platform, which is our packet capture and analysis platform. What that does is it takes packets directly from the network, and it can be sent via span port or so forth, and we'll automatically convert that to IPFix. And that will be sent to LiveNX to gather that application performance metrics. So that's the primary way that we're able to report on application performance.
Oh, that's great. We have a couple more questions. I think we have time for that. So why don't we jump into the next one? Can LiveNX help to predict when capacity needs?
Yes, that's actually an interesting question. So we have full WAN capacity planning capability within LiveNX. So we'll look over, for example, the last 6 months and report on 95th percentile WAN utilization per site and per service provider. So those top utilized sites and service provider connections will rise to the top. But likewise, with the advent of things like AI and ML, we also have a platform specifically for providing that visibility and actually predicting things like WAN capacity. So looking at all the historical data, we'll run that through our AI ML engine and then kind of predict out into the future when those WAN circuits are going to be overrun, and when you need to plan for additional bandwidth subscriptions from your service provider. So there's a whole host of workflows that we provide in that live network analytics capability. We call it Live NA, and WAN capacity prediction is one of it.
Great. Um, let's see. What telemetry does LiveNX use to monitor the network?
Yeah, so LiveNX takes in a whole host of different forms of telemetry. Uh, Primarily, as a full NPMD platform, we're going to make connections directly to the devices. So via SNMP, that helps us with things like device health, CPU memory utilization, along with interface bandwidth on a per interface basis. But likewise, there's a whole host of telemetry that we'll get from Flow. We touched on that a little bit earlier as well. So via IPFix, SFlow, NetFlow, we'll get all of that conversational data. And then likewise, we make connections to controllers. So vManage is an example of that, to get further information from the controller about the system. So from that controller, we can onboard, as we saw here. In our next webinar, we're going to look into how we can get further information about tunnel performance. And then API data is not just for controllers, but also third-party systems. So think things like ServiceNow to do ticketing, to update various events that are occurring, or alerts and tickets within the IT organization. We can do that also. And then finally, one final piece from a telemetry perspective is also packets. We talked a little bit about that and how we can get conversational data along with application performance metrics directly from the packets itself.
And we have one final question for today, and that is, how long can LiveNX store network data?
Excellent question. So LiveNX, because we've have a long history of working with the federal government in the United States, along with large enterprise customers, you can store network monitoring data, network performance data for as long as you have backend storage, basically. So we have organizations that, because of regulation requirements, they're storing data for 1, 2, or many years, actually. So we have guidelines, and you can work directly with our SEs or our advanced services organization to plan your network to make sure that you have the right sizing for the amount of data that you'd like to retain. So basically, again, in a nutshell, we can store data for as long as you have hard drive space.
Excellent. Thanks so much, David. So with that, I'd like to wrap up and leave you with a few points. How we can help you. You can go back and review this session again or share it with a colleague once we send you the link. You could also request a one-on-one LiveNX demo session, and you can check out the additional resources on the resource tab in the application. And lastly, David had mentioned the next webinar topic in November will be focused on SD-WAN troubleshooting. Thank you for joining. Bye-bye.